company.
We are Marlboro County. I'm looking forward to what's next in the future.
We said we'd never break the 3-second rule. Never do that. And never become a minivan mom.
Hey, Chris.
As parents, we say never a lot, but never happens. So when you say you'd never leave your child in a hot car, know it can happen. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
I'm Josh Robin, and you're watching Confirmation Hearing coverage here on Spectrum News. It is now a little bit after 10 a.m. on Capitol Hill. That's where the Senate Finance Committee is about to hold a hearing on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s nomination for Health and Human Services Secretary. He is certainly one of the more controversial nominees. This is the first of 2 confirmation hearings for RFK Jr. He's got another one tomorrow before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Most Republicans on the committee today are seen as likely to vote in Kennedy's favor. Despite his views, controversial views on vaccine, on abortion, environmental regulation, and food production, it is not known if the committee will advance his nomination. We'll have to see if there are any Republican defections that might join with Democrats to blocking it. We will certainly, within a few hours, get a better idea from today's confirmation hearing as to where this is heading. And joining me now for some analysis is Spectrum News political anchor Alex Cohen and Washington reporter Reuben Jones. Reuben, I'll start with you. Yesterday, Kennedy's cousin, Caroline Kennedy, former ambassador to Australia in the Biden administration, sent this stark warning, excuse me, to the committee that they should vote against him. What did that letter say?
Yeah, Josh, it was a pretty eyebrow-raising letter that we obtained, Spectrum News, yesterday. And basically, Caroline Kennedy, the cousin of RFK, laid out a blistering account of why she believes senators should reject his nomination, talking about some of the things he did years ago, including putting mice and baby chickens in a blender to feed his hawks. But she also went into concerns she has about his views on vaccines and how she believes he is putting lives in jeopardy and is profiting off of what he has been arguing for, also saying he is hungry for attention, and it would put him in a spot that has a lot of power as the leader of our country's health department. How much influence her letter may have will wait to be seen, but you can expect this letter will no doubt come up in this confirmation hearing in just a few minutes.
Let's bring you in, Alex, about that. Do you think that this letter has any weight among Democrats or Republicans, or does President Trump have much more sway with members of the committee, particularly Republicans who might be primaried?
I think for those who already had concerns about this particular nominee, I'm thinking of folks like Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren, who reportedly sent him a list. I believe it was 175 questions that she said so far was unanswered. I believe we're about to go to our live coverage now.
Fulfilling the responsibilities of this role. The Department of Health and Human Services oversees our nation's largest health care programs, providing coverage for nearly 2 in every 5 Americans. Improving Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP, among other initiatives, presents challenges, especially in the face of a rapidly aging population, stubbornly high costs, and persistent barriers to access. However, this also provides us an opportunity to deliver bold, transformative solutions. As a committee, we share a commitment to advancing common sense, bipartisan policies that improve the delivery of health care in this country. This committee has worked to realign incentives in the prescription drug supply chain, to enhance access in rural communities, to expand the availability of telehealth and improve the broken clinician payment structure, Across these and other issues, I look forward to working with the administration to continue pursuing meaningful reforms that serve the American people more effectively and more efficiently. Too often, patients encounter a healthcare system that is disjointed and is a dysfunctional maze. Complex and bureaucratic chutes and ladders have become the norm. Meanwhile, even as healthcare spending climbs, outcomes across a range of conditions continue to decline. Mr. Kennedy, if confirmed, you will have the opportunity to chart a new and better course for the federal approach to tackling both the drivers and the consequences of our ailing healthcare system. Your commitment to combating chronic conditions that drive healthcare costs will be critical to our success. Prioritizing disease prevention and addressing the factors that fuel conditions such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, Alzheimer's disease, COPD, and cancer will save lives, reduce costs, and build a healthier, stronger country. Private sector breakthroughs from groundbreaking cancer medications to curative gene therapies also offer hope. But misguided government initiatives and market volatility risk eroding American leadership in life-saving R&D. Your advocacy for healthcare transparency has the potential to empower consumers across the country, promoting competition to enhance quality while cutting excessive spending for patients and for taxpayers. Today's hearing will provide a forum to hear more about your vision, particularly for the federal programs under this committee's jurisdiction. Mr. Kennedy, you represent a voice for an inspiring coalition of Americans who are deeply committed to improving the health and well-being of our nation. Regardless of political party, everyone in this room shares a common recognition that our current system has fallen short, as well as a common desire to make our country healthier. I look forward to today's conversation as well as your testimony, Mr. Kennedy. And now I recognize Senator Wyden for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The question before the Finance Committee this morning is whether Robert F. Kennedy should be trusted with the health and well-being of the American people. Committee staff have examined thousands of pages of statements, books, and podcast transcripts in a review of his record. The receipts show that Mr. Kennedy has embraced conspiracy theories, quacks, charlatans, especially when it comes to the safety and efficacy of vaccines. He has made it his life's work to sow doubt and discourage parents from getting their kids life-saving vaccines. It has been lucrative for him and put him on the verge of immense power. This is the profile of someone who chases money and influence wherever they lead, even if that may mean the tragic deaths of children and other vulnerable people. Now, Mr. Kennedy is fond of saying he's not making recommendations about whether parents should vaccinate their children. He's just asking questions and giving people choices. It's a slippery tactic to dodge any real responsibility for his words and actions. And it is, in my view, absurd coming from somebody who's trying to win confirmation for a job that is entirely about making recommendations. These recommendations are going to have life or death consequences for the American people. Mr. Kennedy, if you are confirmed, your recommendations determine which vaccines senior citizens get for free through Medicare. Your recommendation will determine which vaccines are given to millions of kids. Peddling these anti-vaccine conspiracy theories as our chief health officer is going to endanger the lives of kids and seniors across the nation. Just look at what happened when Mr. Kennedy inserted himself into an anti-vaccination crisis in the island nation of Samoa. He traveled there himself to push his views and pour fuel on the fire of a measles outbreak that began due to low vaccination rates. In the end, 83 Samoans died, mostly kids, from a disease that is easily preventable. Americans cannot afford to import this experiment to our great nation. On other health care matters, from abortion to universal health care, Mr. Kennedy has changed his views so often it is nearly impossible to know where he stands on so many of the basic issues that impact Americans' daily lives. In a gobsmacking statement of irresponsibility, in November 2023, Mr. Kennedy said that he wanted to pause infectious disease research for 8 years. Mr. Kennedy has indicated he's open to restricting access to the abortion medication mifepristone, which remains a primary target of the Republican crusade against reproductive freedom. I took this on back in 1990 when I chaired the first congressional hearing on the topic. The science was clear then. It's even clearer today. Mifepristone is safe. The only reason it's under question in 2025 is because people with a political agenda have been out lying about it. Women deserve to know if Mr. Kennedy will abuse his power as our country's chief health officer to essentially implement a national abortion ban by restricting access to the safe and legal medication. Meanwhile, as the Trump budget office threw the Medicaid program into chaos yesterday, Republicans in Congress are proposing deep cuts to the program that will rip away health care from millions of Americans who count on this vital lifeline. Cuts to Medicaid of this magnitude are going to jack up the cost of health insurance. It'll shutter nursing homes and rural hospitals, deprive seniors and Americans with disabilities of home-based care. That approach amounts to handing over our nation's health system to for-profit insurance companies who've made a fortune delaying and denying care. Mr. Kennedy has virtually no knowledge or experience in handling these issues. It leaves him unprepared to take on a crisis like the nation witnessed yesterday when the Trump budget office shut down the federal Medicaid payment portal. After a careful review of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s statements, actions, and views, materials that I have reviewed personally and closely, I've reached the conclusion that he should not be entrusted with the health and well-being of the American people. When he's taken every side of every issue, how can this committee and the American people believe he has anything to say? Let me close by saying I believe more strongly than ever, and I have specialized in healthcare during my time in public service, that we're at a turning point with regard to healthcare in America. If there's one word to describe Americans' feelings towards the healthcare system, it's disillusioned. At every single turn, people feel like they're rolling a loaded dice when they try to get health care. Americans are justifiably angry, fed up, and tired of a system that puts profits over patients. Instead of debating meaningful ways to improve Americans' health care, now the committee is being forced to relitigate settled science about vaccines and whether or not the federal government should help Americans get affordable health care. I know where Democrats on this Finance Committee stand when it comes to an agenda to lower costs and improve care. I must say, I cannot say the same about the nominee sitting in front of me. And let me acknowledge, finally, Mr. Chairman, Terry Mills from Portland, Oregon, who is here to represent Nurses for America, and I'd like to enter a statement from her organization into the record at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection. Thank you, Ranking Member Wyden. Mr. Kennedy, in a few moments you will be given the opportunity to make your opening statement and respond to these attacks and other questions that the members of this committee have. I would say that with regard to the attack on Medicaid that we just heard, that was a false attack. It's been proven false overnight. The Medicaid portal is operating efficiently today and was never intended to be shut down.
Would gentleman yield, since he's mentioned my name? There was a significant amount of time yesterday where there was bedlam across the country over the status of the Medicaid portals. I hope it's being corrected, but there were problems all through the day.
There certainly were attacks yesterday. The problem has been clarified, and the Medicaid portal is fully operational as we speak. Mr. Kennedy, before I turn the time over to you to share your opening statement, I would like to give you a brief introduction. The son of Senator Robert F. Kennedy and nephew of President John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr. has been an advocate for consumers since 1985. After graduating from Harvard University, Mr. Kennedy studied at the London School of Economics and received his law degree from the University of Virginia Law School and a master's degree in environmental law from Pace University. He has founded 2 advocacy groups and has spent the last 40 years working to restore and protect children's health. He was a former independent candidate in the 2024 presidential election, and President Trump nominated him this year to be in November of 2024 to be the HHS secretary. In announcing his nomination, President Trump stated, "Mr. Kennedy will restore these agencies to the traditions of gold standard scientific research and beacons of transparency and end the chronic disease epidemic and make America great and healthy again." Before you give your opening statement, Mr. Kennedy, I have 4 obligatory questions that we ask all nominees before this committee. First, is there anything that you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated?
All right. No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do you know of any reason, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
No, I do not.
Do you agree without reservation to respond to any reasonable summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes, I do.
And finally, do you commit to providing a prompt response in writing to any questions addressed to you by any senator of this committee?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And before you begin, if you would like to, you may introduce your wife and children.
Yes. My wife, Cheryl Hines, is here. My daughter, Kit Kennedy, my son, Bobby Kennedy, his wife, Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, and my nephew, Jackson Hines, is here, too.
We welcome you all. Thank you. You may proceed with your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of this distinguished committee. I'm humbled to be sitting here today as President Trump's nominee to oversee the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I want to thank President Trump for entrusting me to deliver on his promise to make America healthy again. I also want to thank Cheryl and Kik and Bobby and all of my other children who are here today and all the many members of my large extended family for the love that they have so generously shared. Ours has always been a family that has been involved in public service, and I look forward to continuing that tradition. My journey into the issue of health began with my career as an environmental attorney, working with hunters and fishermen and mothers in the small town in the Hudson Valley and along the Hudson River. I learned very early on that human health and environmental injuries are intertwined. The same chemicals that kill fish make people sick also. Today, Americans' overall health is in grievous condition. Over 70% of adults and a third of children are overweight or obese. Diabetes is 10 times more prevalent than it was during the 1960s. Cancer among young people is rising by 1 or 2% a year. Autoimmune diseases, neurodevelopmental disorders, Alzheimer's, asthma, ADHD, depression, addiction, and a host of other physical and mental health conditions are all on the rise, some of them exponentially. The United States has worse health than any other developed nation, yet we spend more on health care, at least double, and in some cases triple, as other countries. Last year, we spent $4.8 trillion, not counting the indirect costs of missed work. That's almost a fifth of GDP. It's tantamount to a 20% tax on the entire economy. No wonder America has trouble competing with countries that pay a third of what we do for health and have better outcomes and a healthier workforce. But I don't want to make this too much about money. It's the human tragedy that moves us to care. President Trump has promised to restore America's global strength and to restore the American dream, but he understands we can't be a strong nation when our people are so sick. A healthy person has 1,000 dreams. A sick person has only one. Today, over half of our countrymen and women are chronically ill. When I met with President Trump last summer, I discovered that he is more than just concerned for this tragic situation, but genuine care. President Trump is committed to restoring the American dream, and 77 million Americans delivered a mandate to him to do just that, due in part to the embrace and elevation of the Make America Healthy Again movement. This movement, led largely by Maha moms from every state, and you can see many of them behind us today, and in the hallways and in the lobbies, is one of the most transcendent and powerful movements I've ever seen. I promise President Trump that if confirmed, I will do everything in my power to put the health of Americans back on track. And I've been greatly heartened to discover a deep level of care among members of this committee, too, both Democrats and Republicans. I came away from our conversations confident that we can put aside our divisions for the sake of a healthier America. For a long time, the nation has been locked in a divisive healthcare debate about who pays. Well, when healthcare costs reach 20%, there are no good options, only bad ones. Shifting the burden around between government and corporations and insurers and providers and families is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Our country will sink beneath a sea of desperation and debt if we don't change the course and ask, why are healthcare costs so high in the first place? The obvious answer is chronic disease. The CDC says 90% of healthcare spending goes toward managing chronic disease, which hits lower-income Americans the hardest. The president's pledge is not to make some Americans healthy again, but to make all of our people healthy again. There is no single culprit in chronic disease. Much as I have criticized certain industries and agencies, President Trump and I understand that most of their scientists and experts genuinely care about American health. Therefore, we will bring together all stakeholders in pursuit of this unifying goal. Before I conclude, I want to make sure the committee is clear about a few things. News reports have claimed that I'm anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I am neither. I am pro-safety.
We'll have order. Please proceed, Mr. Kennedy.
I am pro-safety. I worked for years to raise awareness about the mercury and toxic chemicals in fish, and nobody called me anti-fish. And I believe that that vaccines play a critical role in healthcare. All of my kids are vaccinated. I've written many books on vaccines. My first book in 2014, the first line of it is, I am not anti-vaccine, and the last line is, I am not anti-vaccine. Nor am I the enemy of food producers. American farms are the bedrock of our culture, of our politics, of our national security. I was a 4-H kid, and I spent my summer working on ranches. I went to work with our farmers. I want to work with our farmers and food producers to remove burdensome regulations and unleash American ingenuity. MAHA simply cannot succeed without a partnership, a full partnership of American farmers. In my advocacy, I've often disturbed the status quo by asking uncomfortable questions. Well, I'm not going to apologize for that. We have massive health problems in this country that we must face honestly. And the first thing I've done every morning for the past 20 years is to get on my knees and pray to God that he would put me in a position to end the chronic disease epidemic and to help America's children. That's why I'm so grateful to President Trump for the opportunity to sit before you today and seek your support and partnership in this endeavor. I will conclude with a promise. The members of this committee, to the President, and to all the tens of millions of parents across America, especially the moms, who have propelled this issue to center stage. Should I be so privileged as to be confirmed, we will make sure our tax dollars support healthy foods. We will scrutinize the chemical additives in our food supply. We will remove financial conflicts of interest from our agencies. We will create an honest, unbiased, gold standard science at HHS, accountable to the President, to Congress, and to the American people. We will reverse the chronic disease epidemic and put the nation back on the road to good health. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy, I will begin. Each of us will have 5 minutes to ask you questions, and then at the conclusion of the hearing, if there are further questions, there will be an opportunity for those questions to be submitted to you, and I ask that you respond to them promptly. Mr. Kennedy, you have emphasized the importance of nutrition in preventing and managing chronic disease, improving health outcomes, and reducing health costs. I share your interest in the relationship between our diet and our well-being. And if confirmed, I look forward to partnering with you on those efforts. Would you share with the committee why you are passionate about the nutrition-oriented disease prevention and what you have learned?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I had 11 brothers and sisters. I had dozens of first cousins. I was raised in a time where we did not have a chronic disease epidemic. When my uncle was president, 2% of American kids had chronic disease. Today, 66% have chronic disease. We spend 0 on chronic disease during the Kennedy administration. Today, we spend 4.
All right, we are going to move away from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. testifying before the Senate Finance Committee about his nomination by President Trump to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. This is actually the first of his 2 confirmation hearings, and he stressed in his opening remarks, and he's doing this now, that he's not anti-vaccine or anti-farmer, but rather as someone who has long disrupted the status quo to make America healthier. He was praised, as you might have heard, by the chairman of the Finance Committee, that's Senator Mike Crapo of Idaho, as a champion of public health transparency. At the same time, Kennedy Jr. was also sharply criticized by the ranking member, Democrat Ron Wyden of Oregon. He called Kennedy a dangerous vaccine opponent with flip-flopping positions. Let's go now to Alex Cohen and to Ruben Jones. Alex, we'll start with you. Just reaction to Kennedy's opening statement there.
Well, it's very clear that he's trying to show a different side of himself than what many have seen from him over the past years. He's talking about the fact that he says that he is not at all anti-vaccine, which he has said before, seems to stand in sharp contrast to many of the statements that he's made previously in videos on social media and in podcasts. But he knows this is absolutely key to win confirmation. When you look at Republicans like Tom Tillis of North Carolina and many of the pharmaceutical companies that are based in his state, he talked about being very pro-farm, being a member of the 4-H club as a kid. I think that is a direct line of communication to senators like Chuck Grassley of Iowa, saying, okay, you know, in the past I've said a lot about processed foods and all sorts of other things that might seem to stand in stark contrast to the big ag industry as it's known in this country, but he's certainly walking himself back from plenty of positions that he's taken in the past because he knows his is a very controversial nomination, Josh.
Yeah, Ruben, let's get you to weigh in on this. In 2023, that's not long ago, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said, quote, "There's no vaccine that is safe and effective." He also stands to make money from lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies. That's in his disclosure documents that he has to submit, right? So what did he say today that's different? And what do you think senators will be thinking about?
He has also said in the past in an interview that he believes autism comes from vaccines. So this is a significant change in how he's framing his views on vaccines today, also talking about how his kids get vaccinated. But this has been the crux of the argument from senators, from people in the healthcare field, from just folks at home, arguing about the concerns that he will have, the impact he will have on vaccines around the country. So this will come up a lot during the hearing. And you mentioned there, Josh, that yes, he also does have a conflict of interest because he's involved in litigation against pharmaceutical companies, in vaccine litigation, specifically against Merck, receiving a 10% of contingency fees in vaccine litigation. So that would put him at a conflict of interest involved in that litigation while also presiding over organizations like the CDC, which are involved in deciding what vaccines Americans get. Just to broaden out here for a second, Josh, I would argue the HHS is perhaps the most influential department for Americans at home directly, and that's because it impacts things like your health, your food, Medicare, Medicaid. It oversees agencies like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which was so critical in the discussions revolving the COVID vaccine, the COVID pandemic, and more. Also involves the Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. So this is a very impactful organization that is massive in size, scale, scope, and money.
Have you weigh in on that? What role might Kennedy play? How much latitude would he have if he is confirmed as secretary to making America healthier, or, as his critics say, risking America's lives? Alex, are you there? I wanted to
yes.
Sorry,
I couldn't hear if that was for. No,
yeah, that
absolutely.
Please go ahead.
He would have a fair amount of authority over this. I mean, to a certain extent, right? And I think this is where things get very difficult to parse out. It's very similar to the situation that we saw yesterday with this freeze on federal fundings. You know, many of the things that RFK Jr. has talked about, things like nutrition and vaccine, really when it comes down to it, for a long time in this country, has been personal choice. He made mention in his opening remarks today about the mothers in America and how much support. I mean, he's really seen as a hero figure to many in this country, moms who are concerned about the food that is available in this country and the toxins that might be in it, or the pesticides and vaccines. You know, a lot of this has been a choice. But, for example, here in California, we've got very strict rules. Kids can't go to school unless they receive a certain vaccine. So, you know, I think there's a lot to parse here. Things things like vaccine mandates that we saw come up during the pandemic. A lot of this is decided state by state, so you could make the argument that to a certain extent, Kennedy in this position would be limited in the roles that he could have and how much jurisdiction. But, you know, there's a lot that happens on the federal level. And of course, as we've talked about, the fact that a lot of poor people in this country rely on the federal funding of vaccines in order to stay inoculated from diseases. So there is still a lot that this one person could have when it comes to control of the future of our health as a nation.
It's really interesting because I think even Donald Trump's biggest critics would have to acknowledge that he deserves enormous credit for Operation Warp Speed, which brought about the vaccines. I think people would argue that, which brought about COVID-19 vaccines so quickly. And yet Trump is not only nominated him, but is standing by him. What's the political calculus, Alex, behind that?
Well, let's just kind of zoom out for a moment and remember that RFK Jr. was a presidential candidate in last year's election cycle. And there was plenty of times where he distanced himself from Donald Trump, saying, I'm not like Biden, I'm not like Trump. And that had tremendous appeal. Josh, early on in his campaign, RFK Jr. Met with both Republicans and Democrats here in Southern California. And I can tell you people were ecstatic about him as an alternative to the then two front runners. But eventually, what we saw was that RFK Jr. he wasn't able to get on enough ballots in enough states. He didn't really have the funding to continue his campaign. And eventually, he suspended it and put his support with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump at that time, remember, this was a neck-and-neck race, really saw the potential of picking up RFK's supporters as a way to push him over that finish line. So, you know, you could make the argument that in many ways this is a business deal. RFK Jr. helped Donald Trump out back then, and now this is the president's opportunity to return the favor by giving him this key position on an issue that he cares deeply about. Of course, you know, RFK Jr. also has done a lot of work on the environment. There's plenty of other things that he's concerned about, but health, of course, has been his top priority all along. So in many ways, this is a business arrangement, and I think what we're seeing here today is Kennedy kind of taking a page from Donald Trump, who himself, right, as you mentioned, Operation Warp Speed got that COVID-19 vaccine out. Many have argued much faster than any Democratic president might have done, but Donald Trump was also the person who talked about bleach as a potential way to counteract the virus. So, you know, I think we're seeing RFK kind of taking that playbook from Donald Trump, what Trump calls the weave, kind of going over to this way and saying these things when that appeals to a certain audience. Today's audience is very different than the moms on TikTok who are drinking raw milk and not vaccinating their kids. Today, he's kind of realizing, okay, I need to speak a little bit more in this particular light to get the votes that I need. And you know, I think it's interesting to see a man who once considered himself for a long time as a Democrat standing so firmly in line and seeing some of his biggest support coming from Republicans.
Well, it's a really interesting political realignment. Ruben, a two-part question for you. First of all, Kennedy is really painting an America that has never been sicker. What do the statistics say about that? And two, what are you looking for, or who are you looking at, I should say, what senators are really the swing votes for his nomination?
I'll start with part one, Josh. So life expectancy in the U.S. had been increasing for 2 decades. Then we saw a significant drop, obviously, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, as other countries did. And now we're starting to rebound. So there is some improving signs there in terms of where life expectancy and death rates are falling. Let's talk about what's next here. Right now, I believe you're getting questioning from the ranking member, the Democrat. Senators to watch here on this committee specifically. I'm watching Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican who has some concerns about RFK's views on vaccine. Also, Senator Thom Tillis, a Republican who I spoke with just last week, who told me he needs to hear a convincing argument from RFK in terms of his views on vaccines. He's concerned about that. On the Democratic side, and what makes RFK's confirmation so fascinating is that he may lose some Republican votes, whether it's Bill Cassidy, whether it's Thom Tillis, whether it's Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins. Collins. He may pick up, though, some Democrats. Unclear who it may be, but there have been some senators who have been a little bit vague in terms of potential support for him. John Fetterman, even Bernie Sanders, because of RFK's views on food and trying to take on food companies and agriculture and trying to take out food additives. The other senator to watch in terms of Democrat is Cory Booker. He has praised RFK too, sort of, in terms of his views on food. So there's a lot to watch in the dynamics here. And Joshua mentioned that there's going to be a second confirmation hearing tomorrow in front of the Health Committee. They are not going to vote. It's going to be this committee today that's going to be the one that votes to get him to the full Senate.
Interesting. Okay, Reuben Jones, Alex Cohen, thanks so much for your insight. Really interesting. And thank you at home for watching. We have more news straight ahead here on Spectrum News. Don't go away.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so, as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
Hey, pal. Ready for bed?
Hey, Dad. Do we really have the fastest internet speeds?
Yeah, with Spectrum, absolutely.
Oh, that's cool. Can I use that to research volcanoes super fast?
Of course.
Can you learn to make a diorama super fast?
Yeah, you can do that too.
How fast exactly?
The absolute fast. When's your project due?
Tomorrow morning.
How much have you done? Okay. I'll get the glue.
The fastest internet whenever you need it. From Spectrum.
At Spectrum News, we're committed to strengthening the fabric of local communities through our reporting, with stories that inspire and news that matters. Streaming live on your smart TV and connected devices, plus on-demand weather forecasts. It's all there as you step outside with the Spectrum News mobile app, keeping you informed and in the know throughout your day. Spectrum News Plus, local stories connecting communities. Exclusively for Spectrum customers. Now available on your favorite devices.
Whether it's our stories, the warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce, we all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/teamup.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Weather on the Ones forecast. Take a look at this video from a gas station in Rochester, New York. We had some snowy scenes all across the Northeast, and that was the case yesterday in the Empire State. You can see it really falling down and piling up as well, which could easily cause some issues out on the roadways if you're going to be traveling late at night and early into the morning hours as well. This video was taken by Joseph, and we are going to be adding to those snowfall totals over the course of the day today as a system continues to work its way across the Northeast. So the Great Lakes region, Michigan, over towards Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine are going to get in on the action today with some light to moderate snowfall, which could bring down around 2 to 4 inches very quickly throughout the day today. So we'll break it down with Futurecast. You're going to see some of that snowfall really working its way across the Northeast as we get towards lunchtime today. This is right around 12:30. This continues through Michigan and even into the far northern portions of Wisconsin as well. Pennsylvania getting in on the action. But as we get into the overnight hours, you'll notice the coverage of snow showers will start to wind down. Great news for that Thursday morning commute. Should be pretty dry and quiet. Certainly going to be on the chilly side of things temperature-wise. But as we transition into Thursday night and Friday, we may see some liquid precipitation starting to work its way to the Northeast, which could convert into some snowfall by the time we get towards Friday as well. That'll be something to watch as our next storm system progresses towards the eastern coast. But as far as snowfall totals go, we're expecting anywhere between 2 to 4 inches locally. Could see some isolated snow bands bringing down some snowfall totals around 5 to 6 inches at the very most. That's mainly for some of those higher elevations. But aside from
from that, we're not looking at any significant snowfall totals from this storm system. 3-day forecast in Buffalo, New York. We're going to have some no showers in the forecast today, maybe a bit of a